Hi guys, it is a chilly day in Columbus, Ohio, as we have stumbled into late January 2019. Since I'm such a big consumer of carbohydrates and I'm at high risk of developing type 2 diabetes, I thought it would be a good idea to do a at-home glucose tolerance test. So what I've got here is some maple syrup, and I will consume 1/2 cup of maple syrup as a snack. And that's about 105 grams worth of carbohydrates, roughly 420 calories worth. And this will be a good indicator of how my body is handling a big big sugar load. And I'll be doing this at about 3 hours after my lunch, and we'll take some measurements afterwards and see how it goes. I know it's terrible what they do to these maple trees these days. They got them trees crowded into the forest together, and they're pumping them full of hormones and antibiotics just to squeeze out a little more syrup. But a man's got to eat. All right, we got a pre-maple syrup blood sugar of 120. That's about 3 hours after my lunch, and we'll see what happens from here. 30 minutes later, 1 hour later, we're at 129. And just to clarify, that last reading was 1 hour after I ate the maple syrup. And since my glucose was headed down, I didn't take any readings after that. But I have taken some other readings. The day of that test, my fasted glucose came in at 86. And then after I had breakfast, about an hour and a half after I finished breakfast, I was at 137. And then 2.5 hours after I finished breakfast, I was at 108. And then also I took a measurement the day after the maple syrup experiment, and my fasted glucose was 82. So anybody who knows anything about diabetes would realize these are numbers that are far removed from a person with diabetes. And this is just one more piece of evidence. Again, the Seventh-day Adventist study is a good one, where 90,000 people were looked at over a 10-year time period. And it's interesting to note that the omnivores, the people who ate all types of meat and fish, had a diabetes rate that was roughly 20% lower than the general American public. So that's good. But when you looked at the pescatarians within the Adventist study, these are people who cut out beef and chicken, just ate fish, they had only about half the risk of diabetes as the full meat eaters. But then when you looked at the vegans, they had less than half of the diabetes risk as the pescatarians. So that tells you something about eating fish and diabetes risk. And this also shows up in the insulin index of foods, where you see that fish is very insulinogenic. And okay, and I'm sure people will say, well, you're cherry picking. I'll make a deal with you. Why don't you find a study with 90,000 people followed over a 10-year time period, and this study will show that the meat eaters had a 80% lower risk of diabetes than the vegans. When you find that study, you be sure and let me know.